Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 44. We have about 1,700 subscribers on YouTube, and for that, I am very, very grateful. Just wanted to say that at the top. If you're watching on YouTube, appreciate you. Hit that subscribe button. That helps us out a ton. The show, which I do twice a week usually, sometimes three, is presented by First Resource Bank. It's a member FDIC bank in the Minneapolis area. They have a branch in Lino Lakes. I believe I'm saying that right. Sometimes I'll say Lino Lakes, but Lino felt right. You can find them there. You can find them all over the Minneapolis area, but phenomenal people run by Tim Siegley, Aaron Siegley, Charlie Anderson. They're Vikings fans. They love this team. They're having as much fun as you and I are watching this thing on a weekly basis. And why would you not want to bank with people who are, fans of this whole thing? Beyond that, I want to say if you're not, please go to theathletic.com. The Athletic, where I cover the team every day. I'm in the building right now. I'm in the building every day, talking to people all the time who work for the team and trying to get as best of a feel as I can in covering a season that was not expected for anybody. 13-2. I got back from Seattle probably 5 hours before I'm recording this on Monday, December 23rd. Running on very little sleep, running on a lot of caffeine, and just got a lot of thoughts. I'm going to pour it all out as I usually do. And this, as you know, early in the week, there are times where I'll come with thoughts. There are times where I'll just take listener questions. Because my mind is operating at approximately 53%, thought I'd take some questions today from the listeners. Got those over on Twitter. If you're not following me, I'll put those out usually. The call for questions usually like early in the week. So at Alec_Lewis on Twitter. But got a bunch of really good questions. We're going to hit Sam Darnold pretty heavy. Talk about this upcoming Packers game kind of briefly. And we'll be back later this week. Another note before we really hop into this thing, I'm actually going to be hosting Paul Allen Show 9 to noon on Thursday. So the 26th of December, 9 to noon. You can hear me on there with Max Fuller. Really excited to do it. I've done it before, and it's a blast. So if you're a listener here, come over there and have spend your after Christmas morning with us, please. That would be pretty cool. Just wanted to clue you guys in on that. Let's hop right into it. Where do y'all want to start? You want to start on the game? You want to start with the atmosphere? I'd never been to Seattle, and you guys probably heard that if you listened to last week's show. I was very excited to do it. I thought the atmosphere was just phenomenal. The stadium is really freaking cool, really cool. Just not overhyped, not overdone at all whatsoever. The electricity in there, you could feel it. Everything about, Seattle, it was rainy, it was gray, there were interesting aspects of the city at times if you're picking up what I'm putting down, but I really thought it was awesome. It wasn't that cold. It was good. It was really fun. And then the game was just aesthetically pleasing. Like I was thinking back about this season and the Vikings came back against the Cardinals and they won that game, but that game felt like you were watching like people trying to climb out of quicksand. It was a brutal, just observation on the eyes. Whereas Sunday afternoon in Seattle was just, it was very aesthetically pleasing. Not if you're Brian Flores or the Vikings defense giving up some of those pass plays that they gave up, but just, in general, to see the ball move down the field the way it was. And for really, the Vikings faced a lot of too high coverage, which I've talked about a lot on this channel. It's a lot of two safeties deep, and it really is an attempt to make you run the football, to not allow you to have explosive plays. And the Vikings were able to move the ball against that, which I thought was a really good sign moving forward. Again, have a lot of thoughts on this. I'm going to segue, and then we'll get back to the Vikings. I'm going to hit Sam Darnold right off the top. But my flight to Seattle, because we're on the subject, why would I not? Flight to Seattle on Saturday afternoon was delayed. I've got no complaints. I'm not one of those tweet about the airlines, send a terse email. It's not really my vibe. Like, stuff happens, maintenance happens, the wing breaks, and you got to grab the toolkit and get to the hangar and fix it. No, I don't know what the heck they did, but I do know that once the delay ended, the 6-hour delay or wherever it was, I might have already embellished that delay. I get on the plane. I'm sitting next to this kid. Seemed like a nice kid. I'm kind of young too. Immediately he takes his shoes off and he leans back in the chair. And it's just, that's one of those, you guys don't get to know me. I mean, I don't know. I'd say we've got to know each other fairly well over the course of this podcast. But one of the things that really gets to me is it's the leaning back in the chair. What? So you get 3 extra inches? And then you're bothering the person behind you. We can all kind of work together. The feet, I didn't really need to smell the guy's feet on the plane for 4 hours to Seattle. But anyway, that's what happened. Once that ended, again, phenomenal trip. But I just wanted to give you guys one of those looks into what's going on through my head as I'm listening. I've got my AirPods in. I'm focused. I'm locked in for this flight, business trip. Here we go, ready to rock. And this kid was having a good time, and nobody else was in his crosshairs. So, yeah, just that's some of those things. I get sometimes you think about it. Let's get to the questions and stop talking about airplane etiquette because you guys are probably either laughing or I don't know, waving at the camera screen. Let's just go right into Sam Darnold. Let's find a question on here from Twitter. If someone's asking about it. Here we go. Let's see here. Jay Cord 21 asks, what number do you think is too high for the Vikings to re-sign Sam and just turn the keys over to JJ? Or how low is the number? How low does it have to be per year for them to bring back Sam? I mean, the reality is, I wish I could give you guys an explicit answer, but I can't. The way I would go about this conversation is to say that, you know, I think the more I've watched this league, and the more I've talked to people in this league, the general consensus with the way the cap is structured now and the way these teams operate is there are really like two clear, that's an important word here, two clear paths to winning it all. You either have the superhero, the Mahomes, the Allen, the Lamar maybe, or you have the rookie quarterback contract that allows you to build up everywhere else. Like those are the two very obvious paths. Now, a lot of teams don't choose those paths. You pay the good quarterback, but not the great one because it keeps your floor high. You take a shot on a Baker Mayfield because you want to kind of identify a window and you really want to keep that window open. The interesting thing about Sam Darnold is if you'd asked me this question a month ago, and I'm just being straight up honest here, I would have said, and I think there would have been people inside the building who would have said, he's playing really well. I mean, he just is, but he probably hovers in that in the middle of the spectrum between those two clear approaches to winning. The reality is, over the last 6 games, and I tweeted this stat on Sunday night, Sam Darnold's thrown 15 touchdowns and 1 interception. And that 1 interception was a 4th down call where he threw it up because you have to on 4th down. There's no reason not to. And Kevin O'Connell today, when talking about that pick, was like, it was a bad play call anyway. So that one pick, he felt like was a bad play call. So you take the numbers, which is, I mean, unbelievably impressive on the surface in general. But then beyond the numbers, like you guys are watching the same things I am. Even in Nashville, where it wasn't like a spectacular game, but they couldn't run the ball at all in that game, so a lot was on his shoulders. The pocket movement, like that is not that type of pocket movement that he displayed then and he's displayed for the last 6 weeks. That is not like the easiest thing to just replace. Neither is the arm strength to go from one hash to the opposite sideline with anticipation. Like you have to be able to really rip it to be able to make those throws. The thing that's impressed me most is the decision-making, the conviction. He looks to his left, nobody's there. He progresses right, boom, touchdown to Jordan Addison. Like it is just very quick. And I feel like so much of like the early season turnovers, the Colts red zone turnover, it feels like this staff has gotten him to a place to where he feels like on early downs, do not make a potential no play a terrible play. And he's done such a good job of just eating it at times when there's nothing there, or finding the check down when there's nothing there. And it's quickly finding it. It's not like he's taking time, tick, 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 tick. No, like it is very quick operating. And so I guess the overall point with what I've been talking about in terms of the last 6 games is that I don't know if he's necessarily been the superhero level, but he's been pretty dang close. I mean, it is, and this is not hyperbole. Like, this is top 7 quarterback play that the Vikings have gotten now for you can't just scoff at this sample size. I mean, it's 6 games. And I'll just, I wanted to start with this question because after the game Sunday night in Seattle, I went to dinner with a couple writers. They I don't know if they're listening. If they are, they know who they are. And we were talking about this. And I told them, it's like a month ago, you asked me the question about bringing back Sam Darnold. And it's hard for me to think about paying a guy $40 million a year because of how much work this Viking staff has done to get to a place at which you're not paying that money to maximize your roster. But the reality is, with the way that Sam Darnold's playing, and I've had to come to this conclusion, and I guarantee you people inside the building have gotten there as well. Like, with the way he's playing now, paying $40 million for that type of player becomes way more palatable than it was, I mean, frankly, with Kirk Cousins. And I know Kirk was unbelievably productive, but he did not have this mobility where he can scramble and get you a third down. The pocket movement, the ability to evade, like that did not exist. The overall arm strength, I always felt like Kirk's arm strength was underrated. But, I mean, this is what we're seeing is at an interesting level. And then you compound all of that with the reality that Sam is only 16 games with this offense, and with Kevin O'Connell as the play caller and Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison as skill players. So you would think more time with this infrastructure would just raise the floor. And as you listen to me, you're probably like, man, he's talking himself into them paying him $40 million a year. And the reality is, I mean, you've won 13 games. You have a roster of a lot of veteran players, and you've kind of proven that there's a window here. And to me, when a window is available, like, you can't bank on replacing that position and that level of play specifically with a player who's never played before coming off a major injury, and B, even with another option like a Daniel Jones. It's just not a no-brainer at all that you can just pluck guys on the street and they can play like this. It's just not the reality if you've been watching on a weekly basis. And so, to get to the original question, Jay Cord, I mean, it's very hard to say what the number would be. Like, you look at Baker Mayfield, okay, or you look at Derek Carr. Derek Carr got $100 million guaranteed, and he's way older than Sam Darnold. And that's over like 2 years. So, I mean, if that type of offer would exist for Sam Darnold in the market in terms of a 3-year deal with 100 guaranteed, would he prefer to stay in this infrastructure with 2 years guaranteed worth 80? Like, could they get him at some kind of discount? Like, if that's the case, I mean, I think you really have to talk about it. I know how they will treat this. We'll have to watch what happens down the stretch. There's no question. But then once the season ends, they're going to do exactly what they did last year. I guarantee it. They will hash out each avenue and how it will affect both the locker room internally, the vibes around the building, the development of J.J. McCarthy, the resources that they'll have from a free agency perspective, and they will map out each avenue and break it down in terms of the key decision makers, the key exec staff, head coach Kevin O'Connell. And I've said on this podcast in past weeks, like, ultimately, to me, Kevin O'Connell he knows quarterbacks as well as anybody in this building. And so the decision and the decision that he pushes for, to me, is probably the decision that will end up occurring. And what I would hope is that decision is made with the broad spectrum in mind. I know that's a lot there, and I'm throwing a lot at you. But the other thing I want to say in regards to the Darnold conversation is, even if you pay Sam Darnold, let's just say $41 million for next season, you still have more cap space to spend than you had this season. You could still go out and sign an interior offensive lineman. You could structure if you signed to a multi-year deal, you could structure it on the back end to where you could go sign the same types of players you would sign next season if you didn't have Sam Darnold. Like there are creative ways to do it. I think people have forgotten in some capacity that the Vikings are still this season paying the dead cap hits of Kirk Cousins and Danielle Hunter, and they're doing the and so their cap was shrunk because of those dollar amounts that they took on. And so they're still not maximizing the roster the way that they can next year, even if they pay Sam Darnold. So it's a lot there. There's so many dynamics. Like I mentioned J.J. McCarthy, but not only has he never played in an NFL game, he's also coming off a major injury. Now, that doesn't mean I don't think he's going to progress and be ready in time, but these guys are not robots. Like to rehab a torn meniscus and to do it after not playing for essentially, 8-10 months, whatever it's going to be, that is going to require like a full revamp physically from a mechanic standpoint. Like that is just not something that it's not just this guarantee. I think that we often feel like it is because guys just rehab and return all the time. So I don't know. Like in terms of number, the Vikings have the franchise tag. So at their disposal. And we talked with Ben Lieber a couple weeks ago where it's like, if the Vikings were really savage about it, you could just slap the franchise tag, but they're not going to do that because that's not to say they're not going to apply the franchise tag, but they're not going to do it without conversing with Sam Darnold's representatives to ensure that it's kind of the best feeling for both sides. It's also pretty clear, just being in the locker room, how much these guys love him and respect him. That's not to say that they wouldn't be the same way for J.J. McCarthy. I know they would. He would, I'm sure, be able to corral these guys. But there is something to just kind of like riding this wave and seeing how it works out. So I don't know. Let's say that an extension could happen for 2 years, 75 or 3-year deal, $75 million guaranteed. You're cutting into the surplus value of J.J. McCarthy's rookie contract, but again, you're building off of this window that is obviously open right now with a group of players that a lot of them are veterans. So, regardless, either way, like there is a big onus on drafting, and I'm wading into all these waters, but these are all factors at play that, again, as I've said on the podcast before, will be ironed out 2 floors above me. And our conversations that are going to have to be had up there in great detail. And I know they will be. And to think that they've had those already or that there's this preconceived decision made, there's not. Just like last year with Kirk Cousins, it took conversations internally and a lot of back and forth and perspective and seeing it all visually in terms of what it would look like in each path and each avenue to ultimately decide to go the route that they did. So yeah, that's what I'd say. And it's so fascinating. And I've said this with Lieber, but it's like, we're talking so much about the future, what's going to happen. And I get why. It is massive. It is organizational changing, trajectory changing. It is a guy who is a first round pick, who is a very relevant name in the NFL right now with a draftee who's a big name in J.J. McCarthy. So all of it makes sense, but I'm like, can we just enjoy the week to week of what it has been like to watch a player grab his story and his narrative back into his own hands? Like, I just can't imagine being a family member of his. And obviously you make millions of dollars, all this stuff. We know that. We get that. You guys understand it. But to be in New York in that market, to see, all of the stories, all of the trouble in terms of just difficult situations, struggles and late nights of probably Sam Darnold being beaten out. And then he goes to Carolina and he thinks it's going to be a better opportunity, only to find out that David Tepper has had a hard time figuring out what he's doing as owner. And Matt Rule is yelling at Sam on the practice field. It's just to see this guy come in here, receive the opportunity, keep his head down, not say anything electric in press conferences, which is totally okay because that's not who he is. But then just like become as close as he's become with all of these guys in here, it is a special NFL story, and it's part of why this has been so fun. So that's kind of my ramble on Sam Darnold, and I hope that makes sense. As I say every time, I'm always curious what you guys think. So put it in the comments. Like, I'm crazy for thinking it's even possible. I'm crazy for thinking that it's not this absolute no brainer. So that stuff is always interesting to me. We'll segue to other questions because I think it'll be interesting. Nathan Amat asked, did the Vikings put any thought into challenging the spot on the Seahawks fake punt? Fox never showed the replay. Seemed like they spotted the ball at least a yard ahead. I'll tell you, talking to people on Monday, like I did, there were many people inside the building who thought it was short. I don't know if they put thought into challenging it. Kevin O'Connell's pretty – when he challenges it, it often feels like there is very conclusive evidence to what he's saying. Not always, but they've had a pretty good clip when they're challenging this stuff. So it's something I can ask more moving forward, but there were definitely people inside the building who thought that the Seahawks did not get that spot. I appreciate the question. Jay Shad asked, when will Ivan Pace Jr. be back? He's activated from the IR and eligible to practice this week. I've seen him around the locker room, so he's been engaged. I expect him to practice in a limited fashion probably Wednesday, Thursday, and then, I'm going to really be looking at that, and I'd recommend you guys to really be looking at that injury report Friday, obviously, when they'll announce designations. But if he practices full on Friday, to me, that would be a solid indication that he might be able to play in this game. And in conjunction with me saying that, the Vikings, man, they could use him in this game. I don't need to tell you guys about the Packers and their run game and Josh Jacobs and the physicality and the punch you in the mouth. I mean, this Packers offense right now is just built on, as Kevin O'Connell would say, play style at the line of scrimmage. Like, it is punch you in the mouth, let it rip. Josh Jacobs up the gut, pulling guards, deception in the backfield. And so to have a guy like Ivan Pace, who, as I've said, is not always perfect in terms of like the gaps that he's fitting, but is so often able to just wiggle his way underneath offensive linemen and make plays, and to bring the physicality against those guys would be absolutely massive. The other thing that's like hard to explain, and it's really even hard to kind of absorb from my standpoint, is there is such a difference with this defense when Blake Cashman and Ivan Pace are out there together. Why, Alec? Why do you say that? Why does that make sense? Well, I can give you the numbers, but I'm just going to explain it. Blake Cashman is better in coverage. He just is. He's been better as a pass rusher than I think I would have thought, than I think a lot of people would have thought. But he's better in coverage. Ivan Pace Jr., meanwhile, is better blitzing or filling gaps in the run game. Whereas Josh Metellus, who has filled in a lot of times for Ivan Pace, Josh is probably better in coverage too. He has wiggle. He can get to the quarterback, or he can he can make tackles in the run game, but not at the level that Ivan Pace Jr. does. So when you can blitz one linebacker in Ivan Pace and have Blake Cashman and Andrew Van Ginkel in coverage with those guys in tandem, it makes this defense, it just helps the underneath aspects of this defense a lot more. And I think gives the Vikings a better chance of putting the opposing offense in third and long situations. And the more they're in third and long situations, the opponents, the longer they have to hold the ball for the routes to declare. And guess what happens the longer you have to hold the ball? The pass rush is more likely to get home, and that's when negative plays happen. That's when sacks happen. That's when this defense can be very formidable. So to have Ivan Pace Jr. back this weekend would be absolutely massive. I'll be watching that injury report and his status on there very closely, and I imagine you will be too, Jay Shot. Roy McAvoy. I wish, man. What a movie. Happy Gilmore. I think they're making another one, maybe. That's crazy. I think Roy McAvoy, it might actually be Tin Cup, but you guys can troll me in the comments, or friends can text me trolling me about that. What is your take on the dynamic with Flo and KO? Two alphas. Curious how they're able to collaborate and how KO avoids a Ditka Ryan like power struggle. Great question. Uh, Astute question for sure. I mean, I mean, I would say they're able to collaborate because I think there is immense respect for each other. Brian Flores, I mean, there's no question. Two alphas. I say this all the time. If you are a head coach in the NFL and your job every 3 times a week is to get up in front of that team and speak to some of the greatest athletes in the world who are alphas unto themselves, you better have a confidence. You better have an ego. Like that's just the job. And if you have the conviction to scheme up a play in a pivotal moment that is being watched and viewed and analyzed by thousands and hundreds of thousands of people, then you better have a level of confidence that some of us wouldn't have to be able to be in those environments. Why sometimes, like, I think some great offensive play callers don't end up being head coaches. Why? Because they don't have the command of the room that Kevin O'Connell obviously has from this team. And I think Brian Flores, from his perspective, really respects that. And I think Kevin O'Connell just knows how good of a coach and how good of a football mind that Brian Flores is. And so it'd be hard not to respect that guy. Now, like, you know, even in writing, when I write about these two working together or the front office and the coaching staff working together, like, it's not always going to be great. There are always going to be times where difference of opinions exists. I mean, like, this is just me speculating, but would the front office that drafted Dallas Turner want to see him more? I'm sure they do. Would Brian Flores hope when his defense is playing well that the offense can produce? Like, I'm sure he does. And it goes both ways all over the place. But I think in general, there is enough of an understanding of really the intention behind the work and the play calls and the personnel decisions that everybody at the end of the day, like, can be okay with it. So that's what I'd say in terms of that. But it's I mean, I think, you know, you have conversations, or I do at least, with people around the league, and I have for years. And I've done stories about the draft and the dynamics in the room, and I don't think you can talk enough really about the interpersonal dynamics of these organizations filled with alphas. Like, it is not always rosy. It is why sometimes decisions are made wrongly. A front office will think a player is great. They'll draft the player for a defensive coach that doesn't like that player. And then that player from the get-go, like, doesn't have that lofty of a chance to succeed. So that stuff always matters. It's always at play. And I've written about this in the last couple of weeks. I think the longer a front office is with a coaching staff, the better they get at identifying the types of players that fit with what that coaching staff wants, and vice versa. The coaching staff understands the types of attributes that a front office looks for, and it fuel you see it more through the other person's side, and that's like anything in life, any great relationship in life. I mean, it takes collaboration, it takes compromise, and the more you know what the other person's view is and why it may be that way, probably the easier it is to collaborate and compromise. It's a great question. The other question from Roy McAvoy: haven't seen JJ McCarthy on the sidelines recently. Any insight? I haven't seen him down there either. He might have been down there the last home game, but I'll be looking on Sunday for sure. Sunday afternoon, that game was flex. So I'll be looking. I've seen him in the locker room. Talked to him maybe 3 weeks ago in the locker room. He was there this past week on Thursday or Friday. So he's been around for sure. Wearing a little like brace on his leg, but walking around, which is good to see. And that's about all I've got there. Will Johnson asks, everyone is talking about Darnold next year, but what is the plan with Cam Robinson? That's funny. It's as if we should be talking more about Cam Robinson, not Darnold. No, it's interesting. I guess, I mean, Kirsten Darrisaw will be back from rehabbing his torn ACL. And then I guess the question would be, like, could the Vikings want to slide Cam Robinson over at guard? I feel like they've liked and have progressed to more of these bigger guards. In fact, Walter Rouse, who's been a tackle, wouldn't be shocked if, like, at some point he transitioned in some way, because it helps with some of the vertical run stuff. Cam Robinson, I mean, from his representation perspective, there would be monetary aspects to him switching positions, but maybe he really likes it here. Maybe the Vikings see him as a potential option kind of moving forward. I at the guard spot, obviously not at left tackle. Wouldn't be the craziest thing, but I also, I mean, I think, he's dealt with health stuff. There's been some foot, Achilles, different stuff knee, I believe, that he's dealt with. So that would factor in too. The age would factor in. Like this, just an aside, and I tweeted this past week, but I mean, I wouldn't as you guys think about players that the Vikings trade for, sign in the future, just do not underestimate the age curves, where a player is at in his career. That is stuff that this front office values, because it's just you're playing the odds game. And I think it's smart. Certain players can defy age curves. There's no doubt about it. Tom Brady is a great example, pretty good player. But I think the odds in general would tell you that a player who reaches a certain point in their career is probably likely to start dipping and fall off. And so guarding against that is something this Vikings front offices have done. And that's how I would, think of signings and extensions and all that stuff kind of moving forward. Peter, Dapper Cactus, who wins in a fight, Dan Hayes or Aaron Gleeman? For those of you who do not know, Dan and Aaron Gleeman are twins writers at The Athletic. Go follow those guys if you're not. Really good guys, very welcoming when I moved to the Twin Cities, and I knew Dan before from my time covering baseball in Kansas City. Who wins in a fight? It's Hayes. He can be pretty versatile in terms of his moves. He's, if you get him at a certain point in time, maybe late at night while he's at a bar, you never know. And he'll be there. Gleeman probably matches him with wits and does it with the experience and the pen, having the opinion that he does. So it's a tough fight. I'm probably gonna take Hayes, but yeah, it's tough. I'm gonna have to think about that one pretty deeply moving forward. MN Sports Pain, why the headset keep going out so often? Is this common for all teams? I'm not an elite headset mind. It does feel like it's happened a fair amount. I know watching college this year, it happened some. Kevin O'Connell joked at the podium. For those of you who do not know, the headset went out. His headset did in the final drive. Not the final drive, but the drive that Sam Darnold threw the touchdown pass to Justin Jefferson. Kevin O'Connell's headset went out, and he even joked at the podium after the game, like, that seemed awfully coincidental for it to happen at that time. I mean, who knows with that stuff, but I couldn't tell you whether it happens more often than not. It's a brutal situation when it happens, and they got it fixed very quickly, which was pretty impressive. Dylan Cooney asked, what are your thoughts on the Vikings being so pass heavy? Well, I think part of it is without question, part of it is Kevin O'Connell's a former quarterback. He sees the game through the eyes of the quarterback, so that's part of it. I think a major part of it, and probably the primary part, is his best offensive player is Justin Jefferson, who wins vertically. I mean, Justin Jefferson has so many great strengths and so many reasons why he is as good as he is. But he can deploy all of those strengths down the field: the route running, the ball tracking, the toughness, the awareness in terms of space, like all that stuff. You can do some of that underneath, but with space down the field, that's where that stuff comes to life. And so that's how they've built this offense. Like, that's not it's not like Kevin O'Connell's just like, I want to throw all the time. We have one of the best players in this entire league and probably the history of this entire league. So we're going to do what we can to give that guy the best chance of being as dominant as he can be. And so that's why they pass so much. As far as third down, I mean, some of that to me goes to just, I mean, he would never say this publicly, and I don't know if it's the truth, but my projection of it is, I'm not sure with this offensive line, especially against a front like that in Seattle, would you rather run a well-choreographed pick play to TJ Hawkinson, or would you rather try to run it up the middle for 3 yards against a front that might be able to pierce your interior of the offensive line? Like, I think I'm putting the ball in the hands of the players that were paying the most. And that is not the quarterback now, but I mean, with his value, it should be, and the receivers and the tight end. So I think a lot of it comes down to just a level of trust in those gotta have it moments, that the work that has been put in through the passing game will come to life in those times. Let's see what else we got. Excuse me. Notice Moneyline Mitch. Notice yesterday that Ward, Turner, Pat Jones are getting extended run yesterday, especially during the first half. Van Ginkel and Grenard seem to have their snaps limited a bit. Is this the coaching staff trying to keep them fresh for the stretch run? Yes, without question. Those guys are both healthy. In terms of Grenard and Van Ginkel, I mean, they're dealing with stuff like any NFL player does in week 17 of a season. But yeah, I think part of down the stretch here, even Harrison Smith, like, yes, he had the foot injury, but if it was a gotta have it game Sunday, I think he pushes to play and they let him play, and he probably plays, and I would have expected him to play the whole game. But because they are where they are, it's not to say that they're punting on games. They're absolutely not. But I mean, the aspirations are there in terms of this thing going a long ways, and for that to be the case, you need these guys, specifically Grenard and Van Ginkel, who have played as many snaps for edge rushers as anybody across the league. Like, you need these guys to be fresh and ready. So I give credit to the Vikings staff for being willing to do that. I mean, Brian Flores, the other week I said it's like Thibodeau. Like, he just runs these guys, and they can handle it, and they probably wouldn't have won the 13 games they won if those guys were not on the field as much as they have been. So I understand why Brian Flores has kind of pushed the way he has with those guys. But yeah, to me, it is a smart approach and an intentional one down the stretch. Take 156. Can you explain why Addison and others wear what looks like a snowmobile mask inside and in warm weather? I don't know, style or something. Like, it's not something I would ever do. Jordan Addison, when he wears this thing, it's like this face cover. He kind of looks like Frozone from The Incredibles, but it's swag. It's what these guys do. He knows what he's doing. It's not for me to say. VG J Van Gelder, is there a postseason outcome that should be considered a disappointment considering expectations coming into the season? In my opinion, just my opinion, no. I've written this. I've said this so many times. This team came into the season with an over-under of 6.5 wins. They have 13. That is double. So preseason expectations from the most reliable odds makers in the world was for this Vikings team not to even make the playoffs. So the fact they make the playoffs, that's a plus. I'm not going to allow now. Have the Vikings proved that they should they could squeeze past the first round? They should go beyond that? Yeah, like, I think with the way they performed, with the level of their coaching, yeah. But for me, like, if you lose in the first round, the constraints on the roster were what they were. I mean, from the get-go, like, again, $70 million in dead cap money. No other I mean, the odds that you win with that being the case, with having drafted the way they have in recent years being the case, I mean, they signed 7 key free agents that have all paid. Like, this is beyond what was any remote far end standard deviation of what was possible. And so to even make the playoffs, to me, I understand in saying that there are going to be people like, are you serious, man? With what we've done this year, not having ever won a Super Bowl, like, you're crazy. They better make the NFC. Like, I mean, that's just not how I'm going to live, just knowing the expectations. And that's not to say I don't have would it be in some way if they lose in the first round, they're in Atlanta or something, they lose in the first round, it's going to be tough. But to me, the season it won't take anything away from what I felt like this season was, which was a massive overachievement. I'd be curious on you guys thoughts on that too. KSG, if the Vikings beat writers had a Royal Rumble, who would win and why? It's a good question right there. I don't know. Maybe Mark Craig, the wily veteran, he could get after it probably. Dane Mizutani, he's feisty. He works out. He could do it. Not me. I'll tell you that. I mean, I'm not. No, I don't need to be anywhere near a Royal Rumble anywhere. It's just not. That just would not make any sense. Let's see if we've got any more questions, and then we will hop out of here. I appreciate you guys being here. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button right there. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, rate, review, whatever you do over there, that would be helpful. I'll take this one. SDMASCHE asks, thoughts on the run game? I think we need Jones Akers to get going and remove some pressure from the passing game. I didn't think the run game was very good on Sunday in Seattle, and I felt like there were a lot of favorable looks with the Seahawks playing with two deep safeties and one of them often coming down from the roof. It's a long ways to come to make a tackle. But for me, it's less about Aaron Jones and Cam Akers than it is just, the offensive line. Cam Robinson has never been a spectacular run blocker. Neither has Dalton Reisner. Again, this is a passing offense because that fits around the guys they're paying the most, the guys that are most talented. So I'm never expecting this run game to just be spectacular. I will be interested down the stretch how much that matters. I think you could argue it both ways, but to me, until the interior of the offensive line is upgraded, this run game has kind of hit a cap. It's both the interior offensive line upgraded, but it's probably also just more resources in terms of time, thought, allocation of just game plan. Again, because this offense hinges so much on the passing game, the explosive passing game, which I get, explosive plays win games. That's the reality. Until all of the, upgrades in the interior line, and then just there is this devout commitment to it, where you're taking away then resources from the passing game. I'm not expecting things to be spectacular, and maybe that will come back to bite them, as we said. Let's see here. Twins Rally Squirrel, thoughts on the run D? Yeah, why not? Why not go run D? Felt like they were. I feel like they were a little better against Chicago on Monday night than they'd been the two games before that in Atlanta and Arizona. The Seahawks didn't really run the ball at all. They did early. Kenneth Walker got a couple hits, and then Ryan Grubb just went away totally from the run, the Seahawks offensive coordinator. So, this is the test. This upcoming weekend is the ultimate test for the run defense. And it was so good to start the year. I think Ivan Pace's presence is a big role in that. And that's why I want to see him back against this good of a running game. They do some really good stuff. Maybe one of the most creative run games in the league. So I feel like we will all have a pretty good feel after this weekend where that is at. This is not a question, but Jettis says special season upon us. And that's where I'll end it. This has been an absolute blast in so many regards. I've covered 3 Viking seasons. It's 2 13-win seasons. That's been incredible. I mentioned the Sam Darnold story early in the podcast. The camaraderie of this team, I really can't say enough how close they are. And I was trying to think as I was on my flight this morning, how I would compare it. But if you guys played youth baseball, or you would go to pool parties, or you would go, all the teammates would go to a dinner, this NFL professional team with a lot of dynamics and a lot of ego and a lot of money, they kind of act like that. You'll see them on a Friday, every Friday, just so you guys know, a different position groups picks a meal, and it's in the locker room for them when they finish practice, and they get the meal, and then they're just lounging around the locker room. It's a beautiful locker room. There's fireplaces and stuff. It's great. But you'll see just certain guys mingling. Jihad Ward next to Brett Rippon and Kamu Grugier-Hill next to TJ Hawkinson. It's just the blending of this team is very impressive. The celebration stuff, I really don't think you can overstate just how much fun these guys have had being together, playing together. And I'm a big believer just in team chemistry really matters. Leadership, the people who are captains really, really matters. And a lot of it to me just emanates from Justin Jefferson. I think when you have your focal point, your superstar, and he is as aware as he is, as good of a guy as he is in terms of just the way he kind of treats people, the energy that he brings every day. Like I really think, and I wrote this after the first Packers game, that I felt like his leadership, you just could feel it. And that's just been a persistent theme for me all year. So yeah, special season. Really appreciate you guys listening to this, being here, watching. Always fun. Try to hit 2,000 subscribers by the end of the season. That'd be pretty cool. In the meantime, check out the Athletic stories over there. Check out First Resource Bank. Links in the description below. Listen to the show Thursday, 9 to noon on KFAN. I'll be hosting that. Can't wait to do it. A lot of Vikings talk, a lot of Packers talk. But yeah, appreciate you guys being here. That's episode 44 of the Alec Lewis Show. We will talk to you guys with a full-on Packers preview later this week.